So I want you to imagine you were just sitting on your couch. You haven't moved, you haven't spoken a single word, but your Australian Shepherd is just staring at you from across the room.
Oh, yeah, the stare.
Right, unblinking, just calculating the exact millisecond you are gonna, shift your weight and reach for your shoes.
They're completely reading you.
Exactly. They are reading your breathing. They are anticipating your afternoon routine before you even realize you have an afternoon routine. And that's exactly what we are getting into today. We are doing a deep dive into that hyper-observant canine brain.
It is a fascinating space to explore, really.
It is, because we have this amazing stack of source material from an Australian Shepherd Health Academy. And normally, these documents are full of very quantifiable physical metrics.
Like the hip dysplasia scores.
Yeah, hip scores, eye certifications, testing for that, MDR1 genetic mutation, which is the gene that affects how the dog processes certain medications. It's all very, binary X-ray style data.
Which is important. But, well, having a physically sound dog is really only half the equation.
Right.
I mean, you can have an Australian Shepherd with structurally perfect hips and crystal clear eyes. And if you do not understand the mechanics of what is happening inside that dog's head, you are still going to have a profoundly frustrating companion.
You're going to be miserable.
Exactly. We have mapped the physical genetics pretty well, but mapping the psychological blueprint is entirely different.
So we are putting the physical health stats to the side for this deep dive. We're stepping fully into the diagnostic landscape of the Australian Shepherd's mind. And the central theme across all our sources really demands this fundamental shift in framing.
There's huge shift.
Like, if you are listening to this and looking at your Aussie right now, you literally have to stop asking, how do I control this dog? And you have to start asking, how does this dog learn?
Because the foundational concept you have to grasp is that an Aussie is not... they aren't programmed to simply obey.
Yeah.
That is just not in their genetic code.
They aren't robots.
No, not at all. They think, they evaluate, and they solve problems continuously.
Right.
The working mechanism in their brain is, it's never fully asleep.
Right.
Even when you are not actively, running them through some obedience drill, they're downloading data about their environment. They're noticing the inconsistencies in your behavior and, mapping the cause and effect rules of your household.
I look at it kind of like a smartphone.
Oh, that's a good way to frame it.
Yeah, you might think you've closed all your apps and the phone is just sitting on the table with a black screen. But the hardware is still running background refreshes, right? It's tracking location data, downloading updates.
Who knows running in the background?
Always. And to figure out why the Aussie's brain is constantly running those background apps, we have to trace this back to their original working environment, the hillside.
Right, because a dog managing a flock of sheep alone on a rugged hillside, they were not executing some memorized robotic routine.
The variables out there are endless, I'd imagine.
Endless. The sheep scatter unpredictably. Predators might appear. The terrain shifts. That dog was selectively bred over generations to read a totally chaotic situation and make independent, high-level decisions moment by moment.
Because the shepherd isn't always right there.
Exactly. The shepherd might be hundreds of yards away.
Mm-hmm.
The dog had to process the environment and actually take action based on its own judgment.
Which is wild. But taking that dog off the hillside and putting it into a modern suburban living room, that doesn't unplug that processor.
The hardware remains exactly the same.
Right. The job description changed to family pet, but the brain is the same. And they still pick up new associations incredibly fast, but that raw learning speed kind of, it creates a trap for owners, doesn't it?
It creates a massive trap. People assume a highly intelligent breed just doesn't need as much training.
They think, oh, the dog is smart. It'll just naturally figure out how to be a good boy.
Right, but an intelligent dog actually requires vastly more structured guidance. Because a massive mental capacity is going to be filled with something.
Nature abhors a vacuum.
Exactly. Without a designated job or, established rules or mental boundaries, the dog's brain will just invent its own logic puzzle to solve.
Oh, boy. And what do those rules usually look like?
Well, they'll create their own rules for the house, and those rules usually involve guarding the front window for 8 hours or aggressively policing the cat.
Right. But I have to challenge this idea of the dog constantly assessing the situation, because it seems like it creates a huge point of friction for owners.
How so?
Well, if I tell my dog to come and he stares at me for 10 seconds because he'd rather keep sniffing a bush or chasing a squirrel, that does not feel like an intelligent assessment.
It feels like defiance.
Yeah, it feels like he is just straight up ignoring me. And most owners look at that behavior and label the dog as defiant or stubborn. I mean, how is that not just blatant stubbornness?
We have to look at the mechanism of what is actually happening in the dog's brain in that 10-second window.
Hmm.
The concept of stubbornness, that's a human projection.
Okay, so what are they doing when they just freeze and stare at you?
Their evaluating instinct has kicked in. You have presented a variable, which is the recall command,
Mhm.
and the environment has presented a competing variable, the squirrel.
So they're choosing.
They're running an algorithm. The dog's brain is literally weighing the value of the squirrel against the reinforcement history of coming back to you. They were bred to evaluate before acting.
Wait, really? So it's not spite?
Not at all. They aren't saying no to spite you. They are literally processing the data to determine the most logical choice in that split second.
So they are running a cost-benefit analysis.
Exactly.
And because that analysis looks like hesitation, we humans misread it as a challenge to our authority.
We take it personally.
We really do. Which feeds directly into a very outdated kind of toxic myth, which is the dominance theory.
Oh, yes, the alpha myth.
Right, the idea that to fix a quote-unquote stubborn Aussie, you have to be the heavy-handed alpha. But dog owners who research these breeds, they generally know that hitting a dog or using harsh corrections is bad. But what our sources point out is that the dominance model completely misunderstands the specific canine-human dynamic of a pastoral working dog.
It fundamentally misunderstands it because the dominance model relies on the idea of physical subjugation, right? But herding dogs do not operate on physical dominance. They operate on spatial pressure.
Spatial pressure. Can you explain that a bit more?
Yeah, so out on the field, the shepherd and the dog are partners. They are applying and releasing spatial pressure on the flock to move them. The dog was bred to collaborate with a trusted coworker, not to submit to some aggressive dictator.
So if you bring that aggressive energy...
You bring force or intimidation or like those physical alpha roles into the training dynamic, you completely shatter the fundamental trust the dog is genetically wired to seek.
You are literally fighting against their blueprint.
You are.
And a herding dog's brain is so exquisitely tuned to spatial pressure and tension, which makes them highly emotionally sensitive, doesn't it?
Very much so. They're like barometers for your stress.
Right, so if you are frustrated, your body language changes, your tone changes, and you are unknowingly applying massive spatial pressure to the dog.
Yes. And a physical or verbal correction that, say, a different breed might just brush off will trigger an outsized autonomic nervous system response in an Australian Shepherd.
And the source material actually outlines very specific physiological stress signals to watch for.
It does. Things like lip licking, yawning when they aren't actually tired, turning the head away, or just a sudden tense posture.
So a yawn isn't just a yawn.
No, a yawn in a training context.
Yeah.
It's a biological attempt to lower their own heart rate. They're trying to diffuse the spatial pressure they're feeling from you.
Wow. So if you ignore that and push past those signals...
The dog's confidence crumbles, they become anxious, they avoid you, or they just shut down completely.
Which is the exact opposite of what you want.
Right. A dog trained with clear, predictable, positive reinforcement builds confidence because it understands the rules of the game. It knows how to successfully partner with you.
Okay, so if they are constantly evaluating this spatial pressure and their brains are hyper-tuned to movement and tension, what happens when that space is invaded by something totally unpredictable?
That's where things get tricky.
Yeah, because the single most common issue owners face is the dog trying to herd children, or bicycles, or joggers.
It is the ultimate collision of their genetic hardware and the modern environment.
Right.
Because generation after generation, the Australian Shepherd was selected for one specific neurological loop. Notice movement, assess movement, control movement.
Notice, assess, control.
Exactly. And the dog's brain does not require a literal sheep to activate that loop. A group of running children, a fast-moving bicycle, or a jogger blowing past you on a trail that triggers the exact same inherited compulsion.
They just can't help it.
The dog feels a genuine genetic responsibility to organize the fastest-moving chaos in its environment.
But from the outside, I mean, that behavior looks terrifying. You have a dog lunging, fixating with a really hard stare, circling, even nipping at the heels of a kid.
It looks very aggressive.
It does. I have to push back on behalf of anyone who has seen this. Lunging and biting at heels looks a whole lot like hostility. How do we know this isn't just plain aggressive behavior?
It's all about motivation. Motivation is the key distinction here. Aggression is driven by fear, resource guarding, or a genuine intent to cause harm.
Right.
Herding behavior is driven by the instinct to manage and contain. That intense stare. It's a tool of spatial pressure.
And the nipping.
The nip at the heel is not an attempt to tear flesh. It is a mechanical correction the dog uses to move a stubborn animal forward. The motivation is management, not malice.
That makes so much sense, but obviously that doesn't make it acceptable in a neighborhood.
Oh, absolutely not.
Yeah.
But conflating herding with aggression leads owners to use harsh punishments, which, as we just discussed, only spikes the dog's anxiety and makes the behavior more frantic.
So knowing the motivation totally changes how you treat the symptom.
It has to.
And it completely dismantles the myth that if you just, wait it out, the dog will eventually outgrow this nippy puppy phase.
Oh, they won't. This isn't a software bug that gets patched in a future update.
Right.
This is the permanent hardware of the breed. You cannot wait it out. You have to provide a structured outlet for that drive.
So you have to redirect it constructively.
Yes. If the dog's brain demands that it organize movement, you have to give it a designated space to do that. Whether that's through structured fetch games, agility training, or actual herding activities, they have to understand when and what they are allowed to manage.
Okay, so if the hardware is permanent, how do we actually tire out a dog with this much internal drive?
It's the million-dollar question.
It really is, because the most prevalent misconception in the dog world is that more exercise fixes everything.
People just run them and run them.
Right. But running an Australian Shepherd on a treadmill for 2 hours, it's kind of like trying to tire out a computer by aggressively shaking the monitor.
That is the perfect way to look at it.
You are addressing the physical hardware, but the software is still running at 100% capacity.
Exactly. A purely physically tired Australian Shepherd that hasn't used its brain is often more restless and reactive than a rested one.
Because they're just fit now.
Right. You have simply conditioned a highly fit, heavily caffeinated athlete. To actually drain that battery, you have to engage the software. And the mechanism for that is mental stimulation.
But we're not talking about just one grueling 2-hour obedience drill.
No. The brain needs short, frequent processing tasks scattered throughout the day.
Like what?
Well, olfactory processing, for instance, requires a massive amount of neurological bandwidth.
Oh, like sniffing.
Yes. 10 minutes of intensive sniffing and searching for a hidden toy will drain an Aussie's mental battery far more effectively than a 2-mile jog.
10 minutes? That's incredible.
It is. You want to keep the mind engaged with puzzles, short obedience bursts, and scent work. That satisfies their need to problem solve.
But solving problems is great. What about when you just want to sit down and watch TV? People just assume a dog will naturally know how to relax in a quiet house.
Big mistake with this breed.
Right. Because for a breed whose ancestors, slept with one eye open listening for wolves, calmness is not a default setting. Calmness is a learned skill.
You are fighting their genetic baseline of alertness.
So how do you fight that?
To teach an Aussie to switch off, you have to physically create new neural pathways for relaxation. Owners have to practice structured, subtle exercises.
Structured, subtle, so you're actually training them to do nothing.
Exactly. You're actively rewarding the dog for choosing to lie quietly instead of, patrolling the perimeter of the living room. You have to teach them that doing absolutely nothing is a highly valuable, heavily rewarded job.
And if they haven't learned that job, they will communicate their restlessness very loudly.
Cue the barking.
The barking. And the source material is very clear that barking is just data collection and communication. You can't just slap a no bark command on it without decoding the data first.
Right. You have to ask what kind of bark it is. Is it an alert bark because the mailman shifted the spatial pressure of the front porch? Is it frustration because they're understimulated?
You have to diagnose the why before you can treat the what.
Always. And it all ties back to how intensely they monitor their environment and their handler. This is why the breed is universally known as a Velcro dog.
Yes, the Velcro dog. Because they are tracking your physical position and your micro movements in real time.
Out on the hillside, maintaining that close physical proximity and visual contact, that was how they knew when to work independently and when to take direction.
And inside a house.
Inside a house, they just redirect that working demand onto you. They follow you to the kitchen, to the bathroom, to the couch, because studying your routine is their literal job description.
But if they're tracking our movements 24/7, what happens to that highly attached, constantly processing brain when we actually leave the house?
Oh, solitude.
Yeah, how does an Aussie handle solitude?
Solitude for a Velcro dog is a genuine neurological challenge. Because their attachment is so deep, separation anxiety is incredibly common. Solitude must be systematically taught.
Because if you just leave
If you leave a hyper-observant dog alone in an empty house for 8 hours without building up their tolerance, the resulting panic often leads to destructive behavior, digging through carpets, destroying door frames, chewing furniture.
But the sources highlight that this destruction isn't some spiteful revenge plot for leaving them behind.
No, they aren't getting back at you.
It's a combination of unpracticed solitude and understimulation. And the solution they outline is entirely biological. You have to give them a calm departure, but more importantly, you have to give them a complex food puzzle while you are gone.
Yes, the food puzzle is key.
But why does a food puzzle work so well? Our sources say that the physical acts of licking and sniffing actively lower a dog's heart rate.
It does. It triggers the release of endorphins and dopamine in their brain, which chemically counteracts the rising panic of the owner walking out the door.
So you are basically giving them a self-soothing mechanism.
Exactly. And this level of proactive management becomes even more critical when we look at the timeline of an Aussie's life, specifically the adolescent phase,
The teenage phase.
which hits roughly between 6 and 18 months. This is when most owners hit a wall.
People always say, my puppy was a genius at 4 months old, sitting and staying perfectly in the kitchen. Now he's 10 months old, we step outside, and he completely ignores his own name.
It really does look like they have forgotten all their training. They haven't forgotten the commands. Biologically, their brain is undergoing a massive rewiring process. The prefrontal cortex, which governs impulse control, is still under construction.
Right.
And meanwhile, an influx of hormones is making the outside world incredibly salient. The smells are stronger, the movements are sharper.
So the sensory overload essentially crashes the background apps.
Yes, the environment just becomes louder than the owner's voice.
So they are struggling to process a hyperstimulating environment with a brain that, temporarily lacks the chemical capability to regulate impulses.
Exactly that. And the solution is not to get angry or assume the dog is being stubborn again. The solution is to drop your expectations, increase the value of your rewards, and just consistently rebuild their focus in slowly escalating levels of distraction.
Which requires a lot of patience.
A lot.
Which makes me wonder how this intense, sensitive, herding-driven brain fits into a busy household dynamic. What happens when you mix an adolescent Aussie with toddlers or cats or a first-time dog owner?
Well, they can form exceptional, deeply loyal bonds with kids and other pets, but only if the herding instinct is actively managed.
Because of the movement.
Right, a cat sprinting across the hallway is going to trigger the chase algorithm. A toddler running in the backyard will trigger it. Families have to establish clear boundaries and intervene before the dog rehearses the behavior of, say, pinning the toddler in a corner.
And for first-time owners.
The sources note it is not an impossible first dog, but it demands radical realism.
Yeah, it's not about how many dogs you've owned in the past. It's about how much time you have today.
Perfectly said.
The owners who struggle aren't necessarily the novices. They're the ones who underestimate the daily, relentless requirement for mental engagement. And that requirement doesn't just vanish when the dog turns 5, does it?
No, lifelong learning is non-negotiable for this breed. Their cognitive capacity does not degrade just because they exit adolescence.
Right.
Throughout their adult life and well into their senior years, they need new puzzles. You adapt the physical intensity, sure, maybe less jumping and more scent work for a senior dog, but the brain still craves the satisfaction of solving a problem alongside its handler.
So let's bring this deep dive full circle. We started by contrasting the simplicity of an X-ray with the vast complexity of the Australian Shepherd's mind.
We did.
And everything we have unpacked today, the following you into the bathroom, the impulse to chase a bicycle, the deep sensitivity to your bad moods, the sheer difficulty of just taking a nap. None of this means the dog is broken.
None of it is a flaw.
It's just who they are.
It is the exact same remarkable working blueprint that kept sheep alive on a mountain, simply functioning in a modern living room. The owners who truly thrive with this breed are the ones who stop trying to suppress the dog's nature.
Right. They learn how to communicate in a language of spatial pressure, partnership, and mental challenges.
You have to engage the software, not just the hardware.
Exactly. And just as a quick reminder, since we are digging deep into canine health and psychology today, this discussion is strictly for educational purposes. If you ever have any concerns about your dog's health or you notice sudden, unexplained behavioral changes, you should always consult your veterinarian.
Absolutely. Because a physically healthy dog, whose mind is actually understood by its owner, is capable of an extraordinary level of collaboration. It is a partnership unlike almost anything else.
It really is a marvel. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final thought to kind of just chew on. We have spent this entire time dissecting how the Australian Shepherd's processor is constantly running, how they're observing your every micro movement, analyzing your daily patterns, and learning your routines so they can predict exactly what you are going to do next.
Right, the background apps.
Yeah. So you think you train the dog to sit by giving it a treat, but from the dog's perspective, it just successfully trained you to dispense a piece of cheese every time it puts its hips on the floor.
That's a great point.
Which makes you wonder, who is actually training who?
Wow.
Are you molding the dog, or has this hyper-intelligent processor successfully learned to manage you like a highly predictable, easily manipulated flock of one?
That's entirely possible.
Keep that in mind the next time your Aussie beats you to the leash. Thanks for listening.